Hello, music fans. It's time to talk about 9 new albums that came out on October 11th, and I'll talk about them in my order of preference and give my first impressions on them. If you like metal, rock, and prog music, you've come to the right place. I talk about my first impressions on new albums that come out every week and give my top 10 albums at the end of the month. So let's start off today with a couple avant-garde black metal albums, and that's not usually my thing. I'm not usually a black metal fan, but this week was an avant-garde black metal week for me. The first one I'm going to talk about is Dodds McGurd, which is a weird band name, and their album Omniverse Consciousness. This is the debut album by this band. It's progressive black metal with death metal, avant-garde metal, industrial, electronic, and classical influences. Now, I'm putting this in my excellent tier. Dodds McGurd is the new project from Yusuf Vikotnik Parvez, the mind behind the band Dodd Heimsgard, and also the Dodd Heimsgard guitarist Camille Girardot. And I'm not totally sure why they gave this new band a different but very similar band name to their main one. So their main band is Dodd Heimsgard, and this is Dodds Magurd. Very strange. It's maybe almost like an anagram or something. And I've loved the most recent 4 releases from their main band, Dodd Heimsgard. They made very creative, progressive, and avant-garde black metal that blended in a lot of genres. So that's why I added this to my list to check out. And upon listening to this album, I think it would have fit perfectly into the main Dodd Heimsgard catalog as the follow-up to Black Medium Current, which I love. This album is similarly strange and avant-garde black metal. Lots of weird stuff thrown in, like electronic and industrial moments, soft piano moments, some clean singing, but also a lot more of the typical expected black metal style with shrieking, fast tremolo picking guitar riffs, fast drumming, and an evil, dark atmosphere. Check it out if you're a fan of bands like Enslaved, and of course, if you're a fan of their main band, Dodd Heimsgard. Honestly, I think they should have just released it under their main band name because it fits so perfectly into that catalog as the next step for the band. But perhaps there were some of the other members of Dodd Heimsgard that weren't into it, so they kind of made this offshoot band. I don't know the full story there, but it's awesome music, so check it out. That's Dodds McGurd with Omniverse Consciousness. Next up is a similar one by Oranssi Pazuzu, and the album is called something that's hard to pronounce. It's probably a Finnish word, Muntautuja, something like that. The 6th album by this Finnish band, and it's psychedelic black metal with post-metal, avant-garde metal, doom metal, progressive metal, and dark ambient influences in there. And this is the first album of theirs that I've listened to in full. Before listening to the album, I heard the title track, and it was very interesting, unique, psychedelic, synthesizer heavy black metal. So I added it to my list to check out. Again, if you're a fan of Enslaved, Dodd Heimsgard, Dodds McGurd, you'll like this as well. It's a similarly avant-garde and strange black metal album to the previous one I talked about. I'm also putting in my excellent tier. And then the last one for today that I'm going to put in my excellent tier, and after that I'm dropping down to very good, is Odd Leaf with Where Ideal and Denial Collide, the debut album by this French band. Now this is a different one from the first 2 I talked about. This is more in the progressive rock world, kind of classic 70s sounding progressive rock music. And the female vocals here are handled by Adeline Gertner. She does a great job. The whole album has cool compositions, vocal harmonies, keyboards, and flutes. This one isn't on Spotify, but I heard it on Bandcamp. The 4th track here is a prog epic that's 14 minutes and 24 seconds long called Back in Time. My favorite track on first listen was Coexistence Part 1. That track has some moments that remind me of King Crimson. If you're a fan of releases from earlier in the year by the band Circuline or Circe Link and Christian Nesmith, I think you'll like this one by Odd Leaf. It's very similar, retro 70s sounding prog rock album with female vocals. Check it out if that sounds appealing to you. That's Oddleaf and Where Ideal and Denial Collide. Now moving into my very good tier, let's start with the Madrigal Project and their album 11th Hour, another debut album by an American progressive rock band. And this is similar to the last one I mentioned in that it's classic 70s prog, although here we've got a male vocalist. And this is the brainchild of Kevin Dodson, former architect of the cult progressive rock band Madrigal, who I'm unfortunately not familiar with. But if you're a fan of Gentle Giant, you should like this because they do some of those a cappella harmonies. They have some medieval, Baroque, and classical influence sections at times. If you're a fan of King Crimson, you'll like this, or Yes and Genesis. They really capture that classic 70s prog sound. Special guests on this album are great as well. They include Adam Holzman, who's played with Steven Wilson, and Miles Davis on keyboards, and he does a great keyboard solo. Oliver Wakeman, who's played with Yes and the Strawbs, he also features on keyboards. These aren't full-time members of the band, these are just guest features, but they got some great guests. Billy Sherwood from Yes, Asia, and Circa on bass, a guest bass player. Michael Lewis, who's played with John Anderson, and Jean-Luc Ponty on guitar, and Jane Gedder, who has her band Jane Gedder Premonition, features on guitar as well. So lots of cool guest features on this album. If that sounds good to you, check out the Madrigal Project and 11th Hour for some cool classic 70s prog. Next up in my very good tier is Delta Sleep and their album Blue Garden. This is the fourth album by this band from the UK, and it's math rock with post-hardcore, emo, indie alternative, and progressive rock influences. I never heard an album by Delta Sleep before, but the singles Sun Chaser and Figure in the Dark were pretty cool, so I wanted to check out the full album. And the rest of the album wasn't quite as good as those two singles, unfortunately, but still a pretty good album. I think if all the songs were as good as the first two singles that I heard, I'd probably put this album in my excellent tier. But some of the other songs didn't blow me away as much, so I'm just putting it in very good. Next up, another one I'm putting in my very good tier, Joe Denizen and Stratusvarius released Imposter. This is the fourth album by this American band. It's progressive rock. I think it's their fourth album that was released under this name, Joe Denizen and Stratusvarius, but their Bandcamp calls it their sixth album because I think they're counting Joe Denizen's solo albums. They've got a talented lineup here. Joe Denizen's the lead singer. He plays a mean violin as well. And they've got guitarist Michelangelo Coronelli of Thrill Driver, keyboardist Bill Hubauer of the Neil Morse Band and Crack the Sky, bassist Paul Ranieri of Mark Wood and Riot Act, and drummer Jason Gianni of the Ultimate Queen Celebration, Trans-Siberian Orchestra, Rock of Ages, and the Neil Morse Band. And this album also features an impressive array of guest musicians from the prog rock world, such as Michael Sadler from Saga, Randy McStein, Chloe Lowry of Trans-Siberian Orchestra, multi-instrumentalist Rachel Flowers, and more. Produced by Joe Denizen himself and also mixed and mastered by Rich Mouser, who's worked with Neil Morse, Dream Theater, and Tears for Fears. The single I heard ahead of this release was called Outrage Olympics. It was good. It didn't blow me away, but I think the other tracks on the album surpassed that one, and I was pleasantly surprised at how good the album was, just going in based on the quality of that single. They even do a cover of Frame by Frame by King Crimson on here. Very well done. That's a tough song to cover well. So if that sounds cool to you, check out Joe Denizen and Stratusvarius and their album Imposter. Next up is the last one in my very good tier for this week, which is another changing direction here again. I'm going into the world of pop punk with The Offspring and their album Supercharged, the 11th album by this American band. And of course, this is pop punk rock with pop, alternative rock, melodic hardcore influences. And I thought their last album, Let the Bad Times Roll, was good. I've always enjoyed their music, but never really loved them. I like some of their big hits. I think they're a good pop punk band, but it's not really one of my main genres at this point in my life. But it was when I was about 10 to 13 years old. I loved bands like Blink 182, Sum 41, Green Day, Avril Lavigne, even. They were big at that time, as well as The Offspring. So I checked this out for nostalgia reasons, and it's a very good pop punk album. It's not a contender for my year-end list or anything like that, but it's just really fun and catchy when it's on. My favorite track on first listen was Okay, But This Is the Last Time, which is a great, catchy, simple song. Pretty generic chord progression, but it's one of the softer ones on the album and just has an excellent melody. Some of the faster punk songs on the album are also really fun too. And there's even a moment in the song Get Some that references the main riff of Carry On My Wayward Son by Kansas, which was a cool Easter egg. The vocal melodies and harmonies on the album are all very predictable, but not in a bad way. They're predictable because it's like they're just perfectly crafted to be as catchy and fun as possible. So if that sounds good to you, check out The Offspring and their album Supercharged. Lastly, 2 more albums to go in this video. I'm going to talk about 2 in my good tier. First one's Myles Kennedy and The Art of Letting Go. This is the 3rd album by this American artist. It's hard rock with blues, alternative metal, and grunge influences. It's his 3rd solo album. He also plays guitar, he sings. He's known for his work with Alter Bridge. I love their album from 2022, Pawns and Kings. And he's also known from his work with Slash featuring Myles Kennedy and the Conspirators. The last solo album by Myles Kennedy was called The Ides of March. It was good, but he's another artist like The Offspring that I've always liked but never loved. I think his vocals are great. I'd love to see him do some more creative music with some more risks and innovation. But upon listening to this one, I thought it was good too, just like his last one, but he didn't do much that I found new or exciting. So it's pretty much in the same category as his last solo album for me. Just a good tier album, but not very good. If you like Myles Kennedy, you'll like this. It's pretty much what you would come to expect from Myles Kennedy. And lastly, I'm going to mention Jada Kelly and her album Weather Girl, the 6th album by this Canadian singer-songwriter. This one's not my usual style as well. It's indie rock with folk, pop, and country influences. And I learned of Jada Kelly because she's the voice of Keziah on Protest the Hero's amazing concept album, Keziah, from 2005. That's the album that got me into my favorite genre of music, progressive metal, in the first place. She's guested on several Protest the Hero albums. I hope she will guest on their next one as well. I've never listened to a full album of her solo material before, but I have seen her play a live set. She opened for Protest the Hero. That was an interesting diversity of genres at a show because she plays this relaxing acoustic indie folk rock music, and then Protest the Hero headlines with this fast, intense progressive metal with shredding electric guitars. So that was a fun show to see, kind of strange. Haven't seen anything like that before. So I was curious to check this out, even though it's not my usual style. I thought it was good. I think if you're a fan of stuff like Taylor Swift, I think you could like this. She's nowhere near as popular, but honestly, I think Jada Kelly's album Weather Girl is better than the Taylor Swift album released from this year, and it sounds like it could have been, classic Taylor Swift songs, really catchy melodies. So if that sounds good to you, check out Jada Kelly and Weather Girl. And that's it for my first impressions of these 11 albums. Was it 11? Or no, 9. It was 9 albums that came out on October 11th. Stay tuned for my next one. Next week, I'll be listening to Ekphasia with their album Fell Down the Veil, Anthologies 1, 3, and 5. Bon Iver is releasing their EP Sable or Sable, the French word for sand. Frost with Life in the Wires. DGM with Endless. Jerry Cantrell with I Want Blood. Tungsten with The Grand Inferno. And Sephirum with Winter Storm. And Frozen Crown with War Hearts. If you're interested in hearing my first impressions of those albums, hit that subscribe button and stay tuned. Next week I'll talk about them. Peace out.